მოგესალმებით ყველას, სასამართლო რეფორმატორთა.
So we can get started. Hello to everyone within the International Judicial Reformers Network, USAID, Rule of Law program. It's part of Rule of Law program discussions on the current discussions about judicial reforms. Thank you very much for joining. Short information, brief information about the network of reformers, which is growing and becoming more and more active. Just recently, we were joined by Bolivia, China, Montenegro, some other countries. We are sharing articles, scientific articles, and other information through the network, within the network, which is very important for the growth of our network. I'd like to thank those all the members who are active for their activities. Our today's discussion is about an important issue, which is the role of judicial associations in the judiciary. We are being joined by representatives from Poland and Italy. They will share their country experiences. So a few words about some technical issues. The discussion will continue for about 2 hours. By the end of the discussion, you will be able to ask questions, whatever you're interested in. Simultaneous interpretation is provided. Also, this discussion will be recorded, and the recording will be placed on our webpage, on our website, Independent Lawyers and Democracy Index. To choose language, please use the globe button to choose the right language for you. Now, let me introduce our moderator for the discussion, Mrs. Madonna Maisoradze, a judge from the Rustavi Town Court, and she is a criminal judge. She's a judge at the criminal panel of the Rustavi Town Court. Hello, Judge Madonna, and the floor is yours. Yes, hello to everyone. I'm glad that we have this opportunity to learn about very important experiences from our speakers about the formation of judicial associations. Their views are based on relevant scientific research, which will, strengthen the positions they utter. My name is Madonna Maisoradze, judge at the Rustavi Town Court since 2012, and I will be moderating today's online meeting. Those of you who know the judicial systems, as you know, judicial associations or associations of judges are quite common. Judges usually who have their common views about some legal issues or structures, they join various associations. We have two associations. One is the Judicial Conference since 1999, and it encompasses all the judges. And there's another association that was founded just recently. And this other association focuses on various sensitive issues ongoing in the country. All the associations, and basically it's a common thing for a judicial association to aim at improving rule of law, human rights, protection of human rights. And it is very important for us to listen to our foreign speakers about what they have to say about their own countries, the way they go about in their own countries, and to share this experience. We will have 3 sessions during the discussion. Mr. Simon, Mr. Jan, and Mr. Silvio will be our presenters.
შევთანხმდით, რომ მოვისმენთ სამივე მოსამართლის, სამივე უპროცესო უკაცრავად მოხსენებლის სესიას და კითხვები და მოსაგრებების.
And as I already mentioned, we will do questions and answers by the end of the session. So once the speakers do their presentations. Let me first say that the sessions will concern judicial associations from the European perspective and their impact on the accountability of judges and judiciary. And second and third sessions are about the role of judicial associations in improving the independence of the judiciary in the case of Poland and in the case of Italy. And we can now move on to our first session and give the floor to our very interesting presenters for the speeches. First of all, let me introduce Mr. Simon. He's a researcher at the Role University, associated law professor. He owns a doctoral degree in comparative law. La Sapienza. He was a Marie Curie fellow in Budapest, worked as a researcher in the Judicial Research Institute, and he has written various articles on the. He's also an author of 2 books on judicial councils in UK, and also Europeization of local parliament. So very interesting. Mr. Simon is joining us with a lot of experience, and we can actually give the floor to him. And we have a scheduled time for each. I think if I heard correctly, I didn't quite hear 20 or 40 minutes for each presenter. Please go ahead. Mr. Simon.
Thank you very much. Well, thanks to everybody and to the work of judicial reformers and to Keta for inviting me to the discussion with Jan, Silvio, and you all. That's quite interesting topic, for sure, even though I have to say that this is a topic that is relatively overlooked by scholarly inquiry, at least until now. There are a few studies that give a contribution in this. So based on these studies, but also on the direct experience I have with the French and Italian jurisdictions, I would like briefly to introduce some insights on the role of judicial associations in shaping independence and accountability. But as I mentioned, my role is to introduce mainly the topic rather than to discuss a single jurisdiction, and therefore to provide some elements for discussion that can be into by the other speakers and during the discussion. So to start with, I think it's necessary in a way to provide a definition of what is a judicial association, and the minimal definition is the one provided by Daniel Bierce as a voluntary organization designed to serve the professional interests of judges, and the voluntary element is essential in this regard. As voluntary organizations, judicial associations that are sometimes termed as judicial unions are normally not acknowledged by the Constitution and the law, but there are some exceptions in this regard. For example, Article 127 of the Spanish Constitutions refers explicitly to judicial institutions. Usually, judicial associations as private associations conferred public or state functions, so their functions are not formalized exactly in law or the Constitution, but again, they can be essential actors, and they actually are essential actors for judicial governance. And self-governance. Obviously, their interests can be more or less sectoral, but in any way, they contribute in judicial governance. Obviously, I will refer, and we will refer essentially to national judges association. So we leave aside any reflection on international networks. So associations like the Association of European Judges for Democracy and Freedom, also known as MEDEL. As such, as national associations, judicial associations are a phenomenon that is increasingly relevant, not just, let's say, in pluralist or established democracies, but is also relevant in some authoritarian regimes. Just think about Turkey. As such, the phenomenon recognized by international soft law instruments. So for this reason, in the first part of my presentation, I would like to briefly recap some of these instruments and the content of some of these instruments, and especially opinion number 23 of 2020 of the Consultative Council of European Judges, which has as object exactly judicial association. And after that, I would like to sketch out a framework to analyze judicial association from a comparative perspective, namely the overall structure of the system of judicial associations in a given country, the types of association, and the functions which obviously are connected to the types of association that association can play. And finally, some thoughts on the contribution or non-contribution of judicial associations on independence and accountability. Just a while, I would like to share my screen. I prepared a few slides. Can you? I think you can see. If there is a problem, any problem, just let me know. So starting with the international soft law documents, there are quite a number of documents that refers to judicial association here and there. And one document, as I mentioned, the opinion number 23 of 2020 regarding the role of association of judges in supporting judicial independence, that are specifically devoted to this. So the UN Basic Principle of Independence of the Judiciary that were approved in 1985 basically stipulate that members of the judiciary are entitled, among else, to freedom of association like any other citizen. And this principle, these UN Basic Principles of 1985, underline that while exercising this right of association, of free association, judges need to always preserve the profits and the impartiality and independence of the judiciary. And this basic principle consider association as important because they allow judges to represent their interests, promote professional training, and protect, obviously, judicial independence. The European Charter on the Statute of Justice of 1998, is also important in that it also envisages that judges may be members of professional associations. Again, the Bangalore Principles of Judicial Conduct of 2002 affirm the right of judges to form or join association to represent their own interests before public bodies. Again, the opinion number 3 of 2002 on ethics and responsibility of judges of the Consultative Council of European Judges stipulates that judges should have the right to participate in certain debates concerning national judicial policy. So it affirms the right, basically, of associated judges to contribute in the definition of judicial policies, and also states the importance of judges to associate in unions to defend also their own workers' rights. Again, Council of Europe recommendation of 2010 and Massamართleთა of Judges of 2014. But as I mentioned, maybe it's extremely important to focus on the last document at the international stage, the opinion number 23 of the Consultative Council of European Judges. This is an important opinion, very interesting. I will just highlight 3 points. The opinion acknowledges that judicial association main objective is the establishment and defense of independence. It's paragraph 17. And this is interesting because in doing so, this opinion incorporates a notion of independence that is far beyond the merely formal safeguards and the institutional design of the judiciary. It introduces this, let's say, social element in the notion of independence. Second, the opinion turns association into an indispensable element to substantiate judicial self-governance. These are, again, paragraphs 17 and 18 that enumerate basically a number of functions that judicial associations can play. And third, very interesting, the opinion also sees in its paragraph 20, judicial associations as crucial interface between the judiciary and the broader society. So what I reported here, I cited here, sorry, the paragraph 20 of the opinion, association of judges can also facilitate meetings with the representatives of civil society who are able to express society's expectation of the justice system and the administration of justice. So this is all very nice. I think we all agree on this. But from a comparative perspective, empirical evaluation shows that fundamental differences exist among legal systems. Differences are structural and when it comes to judicial association. And to be fair, it is the opinion itself that in its 4th paragraph acknowledges this variety. As I mentioned in this paragraph 4 of the opinion underlines that 12 of the 35 countries answering to the questionnaire on which the opinion is also based, only one association of judges exists. So 12 of 35 countries have only one judicial association. And also the opinion acknowledges that a great variety of associations exist and differ, among else, in relation to qualification for membership, objective, size, and obviously representativeness of the association. So I would, as I mentioned, would like to just say something about these 3 dimensions, basically the structure of the system of judicial association within a country, the types of judicial associations, and the functions that judicial associations can play. Let's start with the structure of the system of judicial association. And here, it's important to clarify that when we talk about structure, we should not understand the term merely in quantitative terms. That means the number of associations, but also in qualitative terms. So when the different groupings actually reflect different views, for example, on the ideal type of the judge or even different power interests. And also representativeness should be taken into account, since it is very different to have a system country, a judiciary with 10 associations gathering 30% of judges, and for a country or a judiciary with 3 or 2 associations gathering 90% of all judges. So this makes obviously a difference. So as I mentioned, we should first distinguish between fragmented and unified systems of judicial association. In the unified system, there is a trend towards unity between judicial association. As we can say a unified system, we can take Czech Republic, where the system is dominated by one association that has been defined as one of the strongest judicial associations in Europe by Daniel Beers. This association gathers over half of the members of the Czech judiciary. Slovakia is also an example where there is one dominating association, even though the landscape is more fragmented compared to Czech Republic. The same holds for Romania, where the Association of Romanian Magistrates that was formed in 1993 is the dominant association, even though now this Association of Romanian Magistrates is being challenged by the National Union of Romanian Judges that entertains also international, quite intense international relations. France, among the let's say the Western democracy, is an example where a traditional monopoly of one association, the Union Syndicale des Magistrats, is present, and this monopoly hasn't been really challenged by the other, let's say, main association, the Syndicat de la Magistrature. So opposed to and contrast to this unified system, there are systems like Italy and Spain where there is a greater diversity of judicial association. So for example, Italy, Silvio will talk about Italy more in depth later on, but it's a peculiar case study because it's built around let's say, one platform, one association, the Association Magistrates, that gathers 96% of members of the judiciary. Let's say, judges and prosecutors. But the National Association of Italian Magistrates is in turn divided in so-called correnti. So it's divided in different sub-associations that have very different views on many administrative and policy aspects. So the peculiarity of the Italian case is the relatively fragmented landscape. Right now we have 4 main associations, but also the presence of a common institutional platform able to foster discussion among these 4 main and 4 other associations. So this, at least theoretically, entails the coexistence of intrinsic differences between associations with the ability to foster internal dialogue within the judiciary. In Spain, there are 3 main associations and other minor associations. And as I know, Ukraine is possibly one of the most fragmented countries in this regard. If I'm not wrong, there are right now 14 associations that, by the way, reflect different opposing oligarchic groups within the judiciary. And this is also interesting because the Ukrainian constitution explicitly forbids professional unions of judges. Coming to the second dimension, the types of judicial associations. What does it mean? That means that not all associations are the same, and we need to take into account these differences, if we want to understand what a judicial association in a given jurisdiction does or can do in terms of independence and accountability, positively or negatively. So first distinction, it's John Bell who distinguishes two different types of judicial associations based, say, on the aim of the judicial association, those representing political views of judges and those that are more oriented to the professional dimension whose aim is to gather all the members of the judiciary. This distinction might be problematic since in modern societies, any reflection on the professional dimension of judgeship entails ideological and, broadly speaking, political stances. But what is meant by John Bell here is that while some associations are more interested in the broader societal problems and how these connect to judgeship, other associations just aim to protect corporatist interests of judicial professionals, of judges, and where it applies, prosecutors. That means that this moves association towards the trade or labor union model. And obviously, in the same countries, there might be associations that belong to the politico-ideological model and to the corporatist trade union model, and also the same association can incorporate these two models. Italy, for example, is identified as a country where judicial associations have a clear ideological nature, and this ideological nature entails links with political parties, or at least for a long time, create clear links with political parties, Socialist Party, Communist Party, Christian Democrats, and so on. But there are many cases in the history of Italian Judicial Association where this very same association just had their professional interests against the whole political elite. And according to John Bell, this politico-ideological model is in Latin countries. So besides Italy, he mentions also Spain. Spain is an interesting case study. There are some scholars who even infer the political links of judges sitting in the Supreme Court just by looking at their affiliation with given judicial association, just to underline the importance of judicial associations in this regard. This is also interesting because Article 127 of the Spanish Constitution, which acknowledges judicial association, however, also forbids judges to unite in trade unions or to be part of political parties. France is a matter whether it is a Latin country or not, but in any case, France is a country where the trade union model opposed so to Spain and Italy, where a trade union model prevails. The same goes for Romania, where the dominant judicial association I was referring before, the Association of Romanian Magistrates, abstained from political activism for a long time. And on the contrary, if I understand well, Czech Republic is the case where the judicial, basically, judicial association always participated overly public discussion on the judiciary and its reform. Another type of distinction is that between hierarchically organized and horizontal types association. So in the first one, judicial chiefs and top judiciary play a greater role, while in the more horizontal type association, rank-and-file judges have the lead. The distinction between this hierarchically organized and frontal-type association might couple with a distinction between patronage networks on the one hand and groupings based on relation on the other hand. The former focusing mostly on the exchange of concrete rewards and threats, while the latter is focused more on exchanging information, expanding judicial autonomy, enabling mobilization of judges, etc., etc. But this distinction might be misleading because, at least in the last few decades, I think the Italian case testifies that also horizontal association can act as mere power structures based on patronage somehow. Another way to categorize association is based on their values. That means looking at association as groups of magistrates sharing common institutional and broadly speaking ideological views. So originally gathered on the basis of their specific understanding of the role of the judiciary in the society. And at this point, it is possible to contrast two ideal typical approaches. The first one could be labeled as a conservative approach, where claims for judicial independence are coupled by a traditional approach entailing relative existing hierarchies and the presumption that magistrates are insulated from the outer extrajudicial world or extra-legal world. On its opposite is the progressive approach that understands judicial independence as strictly interlinked with the model of a pluralistic society and the objective of incorporating into the legal system the demands of the broader society. So in principle, it is possible to locate judicial association according to their first area, for example, another criteria membership. So it's a formal criterion whether judicial associations are composed by judges or more generally by magistrates only, whether they are composed by lawyers as well. And if the Ukrainian there are some Ukrainian judicial associations that are composed by both judges and lawyers. Finally, coming to the third dimension, powers and functions of judicial association, which is a dimension which is obviously related to the format, to the types of judicial association. One function of an association is, for example, to advocate the labor interests of judges, salaries, working condition, and so on and so forth. Another function is to contribute to build the professional identity of judges, and therefore focusing on the broader societal role in relation societal role and the role in relation to law. That means also the organization of meetings, discussion, drafting codes of conduct, protecting the judiciary and individual judges from internal and external threats, etc. This aspect, the second aspect, contribution to build the professional identity of judges, is very much stressed in the mentioned opinion number 23 of 2020 of the Consultative Council of European Judges. And I think the Italian case, I think, is very interesting in this regard, because personalization of the judiciary over the decades was very much favored by judicial association, at least between the 1960s and the 1970s and the 1980s. And from what I read, even Czech Republic could be mentioned in this regard. since the Union of Judges has served as a consistent advocate of judicial reform, created an education commission in 1999 to provide training programs and classes to check judges. At the time, there was no training school, so that was quite interesting and important. And finally, the same association lobbied in favor of the establishment of a judicial academy. A third function is the one of participating in judicial governance arrangements. It's again the case of Italy, when judicial associations are incorporated through the election system in the self-governing bodies, in the Italian case, in the judicial council. So they somehow indirectly participate in judicial appointments, in disciplining judges, and so on and so forth. Spain, obviously, is also a case in this regard, even though a recent reform of the Spanish has empowered judicial associations in the just to conclude this very quick overview, I think that the great variety relating to the overall structure of the system, to the types of judicial associations and the functions they carry out, entail a non-straightforward relationship between judicial associations, independence, and accountability. And it is therefore altogether considered it is risky to create a necessary link between justice on the one hand and independence and greater accountability on the other. This is not to deny the importance of judicial associations, at least in certain jurisdictions, but we must be aware that they can have also a negative effect. Daniel Beers, to cite him again, obviously recognized judicial association as an institution of judicial self-government, but also acknowledges the potentially harmful impact of poorly functioning judicial associations. We need to understand what is a poorly functioning judicial association, but there are many examples in this regard. One example is the example where judicial association help basically monitoring and enforcing the loyalty of members to both political bosses and political patrons, at least. This is what Alexei Trochev documents. Slovakia, well, in Slovakia, the infamous Supreme Court President Stefan Harabin was supported, for example, by some judicial association, and more generally, there is a perception of respect to independence by association and also corruption. Spain is another example. Here, judicial associations, as I mentioned, are very much formed according to political views and to political connection or party connections. So these links cannot be denied. There is apparently a substantial degree of influence of political parties in this regard. And even Italy, which is a positive case study in some regards, but is also an example where judicial associations entail some negative effects on the judiciary, and there is a broad literature in Italian, unfortunately, on this. Obviously, judicial associations can also play positive functions, positive effects. On the other side of the coin, there is a report of the European Network of Councils of the Judiciary, from which, for example, I found out, but Jan can maybe confirm in this regard, that the share of Polish judges considering their associations as not respecting their autonomy is insignificant, around 1%. Mark 2, the perception of judicial association as a threat to independence is low, and in Lithuania there is a good assessment also of judicial associations, and so on and so forth. So to conclude, and before leaving the floor to the other speakers that, as mentioned, will delve into two important country studies, I would like to underline that there is obviously a need to understand the reality of judicial association. So there is a need also greater effort by scholarship. But for this, I mean, to understand anyway the reality of judicial associations, the three dimensions I underline can serve as a first, at least first analytical framework, obviously to which other things can be added. And I think this is what we expect from next presentations and from subsequent discussion to somehow enrich this very first framework try to be. So thank you. And I leave the floor to my colleagues and try to stop sharing. Thank you very much.
Probably you are muted, I think.
ალბათონო მადონა, ჩართული არ გაქვთ მიკროფონი.
უკაცრავად, კი ბატონო. კარგით, შემდეგი სესიის მომხსენებელს წარმოვადგენდა.
So let me introduce, first of all, let me thank Mr. Simon. Thank you so much. As it was expected, based on European experience, we see a variety of judicial associations in various European countries, and we can summarize that there are associations that are with general aims, but also associations that have specific aims to pursue. Please keep your questions for the end. I would like to present Mr. Jan, district judge in Poland, assistant professor, Department of Administrative and Judicial Procedure at the University of Poznan. He has experience in administrative judicial proceedings. He's a judge in district court in Poznan. He also provides administrative oversight of judges and is involved in research activity. Mr. Jan will be presenting the Polish experience. He will be speaking about the role of judicial associations in terms of judicial accountability and independence. Greetings, Mr. Jan, and I can switch to Jan now. Please go ahead. The floor is yours, Mr. Jan.
Okay, thanks very much. First of all, thank you for the invitation. I'm really pleasure. That's really a pleasure for me to speak some words from the Polish perspective about the Polish perspective of judicial associations. Probably, as far as you know, in Poland since 2015, at least, there is the quite difficult situation regarding to the rule of law and regarding to the structure of judiciary, especially common judiciary in Poland. I work in the Common Court since 2009 or 2006, if we count with the application process. So I can say some words from the practice, but I would like also say some words of conclusion. Simone spoke about the conclusions about the role of judicial associations. My conclusions are quite similar, but I will show it the process of the structure of judicial associations on the Polish example, which is quite unique because of the situation which is current in the Polish judiciary, and which is connected with the strong conflict between the government and the judiciary, which has started in, as I said, 2015, when the new conservative government has started, Law and Justice Party. As far as you know, probably it was connected with the big steps of the reform or deform, because some of the supporters of the government claim that this is the reform, and some of the opposants claims that it is the deform. But I will speak not about the reform or deform of the Polish judiciary system, but about the judicial associations in Poland. And let me show you the presentation. I hope that you can see the presentation. Is it okay right now? Yeah. Okay. So first of all, I will show you the constitutional grounds of the Polish constitution, and about the prohibition of belonging to the trade union by the judges. Here you can see the article of 178. It is quite important because it is about the independence of judges and subjecting only to the constitutional and statutes. Of course, it is also written that judges shall be provided with appropriate conditions for work and granted the remuneration consistent with the dignity of their office and scope of their duties. But what is important in this article is point 3, which states that a judge shall not belong to a political party, a trade union, or perform the public activities incompatible with the principles of independence of the courts and judges. So in Poland, the constitution directly prohibits trade union activities to be conducted by the judges. But the only possibility for the representatives of this professional group is to engage in legal common activities within an organized and formalized structure, is to establish an association. And it is quite common in Poland that we have some associations of judges. Okay. So the general prohibition of trade union activities in relation to judges has been forced since 1997. So when the new current constitution was set, and this is the system, as Simona said, probably about the Ukraine, that it is quite similar situation as far as I understood, that the system prohibit to being the member of the trade union, but it allows also for the establish the judicial association. It was criticized in the literature that is no grounds, no reasons to prohibit to judges to create the trade union, but as I said, in practice, it was substituted by the judicial associations, which are quite vivid in Poland and which help into the protecting of the rule of law. As Simone said, I would like to underline the CCJE opinion from 2020 about the role of associations of judges in supporting judicial independence. And as Simone clearly explained, that this role of the association of judges is, from my perspective as the judge, as the scholar as well, is to defend the judges and law. So this is two main tasks of the association of judges. And the third, also important, but not as much as these two previous, is to safeguard the status and adequate working condition of judges. In this opinion, it is also clearly stated that regards judges, the right to associate is in the interest of the whole judiciary as well. So it's not only the interest of the judges by themselves, but also for the whole judiciary. And it is also important from the perspective of protecting the rule of law and the right to fair trial. Moreover, if we speak about the Association of Judges in Poland and the Polish perspective, I said before that from 2015 there we had the many amendments of the law on common courts organization. We have also the big reform which was criticized by the European Union, by the ECJ and ECHR, so the international tribunals, which was called in the press and into the literature as the muzzle law. And apart from some reforms about the disciplinary proceedings against the judges, this muzzle law made mandatory for judges and prosecutors to declare which associations, political parties, but only about the political parties before the nomination, because after the nomination, it is quite obvious then the judge cannot be the member of the political parties and societies they belong to. What is really important, this information about belonging to the associations is publicly available online. So every judge has to write the statement about being the member of any associations. So it was quite unique to read these statements. Judges in Poland wrote that they are the members of the Catholic Church because they were baptized in the childhood and they never left the Catholic Church. Some of the judges claim that, for example, they were in the Scout organization in the childhood and they never left the Scout organization, so they have to write about this. On the slide, you have two statements. One is of the Polish government, and the second one is about the Polish ombudsman of this obligation of making the statement about being the member of any association. Of course, the Polish government claimed that it is quite important to present for the whole society in which organizations this concrete judge is being the member. And moreover, the Polish government claimed that it is comply with the standard of the Court of Justice of the European Union and may be found relevant for the assessments of the composition of the judiciary and the judge. It was emphasized that it is very important for the transparency of the judiciary and the judges, which constitutes a guarantee of the democratic state of law. And as Polish government, but from my perspective, it is not true. This amendment and this transparency of being the member of any association, not only the judicial association, has been long awaited and also among the legal community. According to the statement of the Polish ombudsman, this goal of this amendment was not to strengthen the transparency and apolitically with regards to judges, but in fact to carry out a general vetting of social and public activity of judges and prosecutors. Some scholars and some judges claimed that this new obligation, according to the muzzle law, was to count the judges which are the members of judicial associations, which may be perceived as the opposers of the Polish government. So the Polish government wanted to know how many members of the judicial associations are in the whole system, and they wanted to know which associations are strong, which associations are quite vivid. But from 2020, we have as judges the obligation to present these statements about being the member of any, I underlined this, not only judicial associations, but any associations. From my perspective, it might be perceived as the breaking of the law to the privacy, to the private law. Apart from all these judicial organizations, it might be perceived as the breaking of the right to the privacy. In Poland, just to show you about the judicial associations of Poland, we have three main associations. Regarding to what Simone said about the different types of judicial associations and about different types of the system of associations, we have one association which is the most, from my perspective, important and which has the most number of the members. It is called Justitia. And we have two smaller ones. One is the Themis, and the third one is the National Association of Judges of Administrative Courts. So it's for the administrative court judges. You have also, that's the information from the websites of these associations. You have also information about the tasks and targets of these associations. As Simone said, this association have at the first glance quite similar tasks, that they are apolitical, independent association of judges, and is the most important task is to defend the freedom and civil rights, and to cooperate with other participants of the social life. Justitia association, so the biggest one, associate over 3,000 of judges among 10,000 of judges. So it is not the majority of judges in Poland who are the members of any association, but the Justitia is the biggest one. The Themis Association and the National Association of Judges, it's more or less hundreds of judges, not even 1,000. So that's the Polish perspective. Which actions, just to make a short step to the example of actions of the Judicial Association in Poland. The first, and from my perspective, the most important one is the creating the opinion about the current situation in judiciary, or even created the actions of the government steps against the independence of courts and judges. As I said, the situation has started in 2015. First, we had the conflict against the Constitutional Tribunal, then against the Supreme Court, and then about the common judiciary. And especially Justitia every time created the opinion about the current situation. Moreover, the Judicial Association created a draft of legal acts. Especially right now, they prepared the draft of legal acts, which may be useful after the election to protect the rule of law. They participate, these associations also participate in the court proceedings of national and international court as amicus curiae, or the publicity. Especially it was important during the legal proceedings before the international tribunals. There were some proceedings with the participation of judges before the ECJ or before the European Court of Human Rights, and members of the Judicial Association also taking a part. The Judicial Associations create or organize also the legal conferences. 2 weeks ago, on 24th of June, we have the great Congress of the Polish lawyers. The most important organizer was the Justitia, with this Judicial Association, and they prepared the 5 drafts of the most important legal acts on the structure of judiciary as a whole. Moreover, we have some small actions, like, for example, the support for judges, which facing the disciplinary action. They are the letters of support, the joint photos just before the court buildings, and so on. We have also the social actions, which are connected with the educational part of the activity of judicial associations, like, for example, the moot courts, or even during the festivals, the music festivals. They are the special the special representatives of the judicial associations, which talk with the members of with the audience about the rule of law and about the situation of the judiciary. Justitia has also the monthly journal with also the scientific articles and with the articles about the current situation in judiciary. And for example, some members of the Justitia organizations take part in the proceedings before the National Council of Judiciary in Poland. We have the great discussion about the status of the National Council of Judiciary. It's the body which proposed the candidates for judges. And this National Council of Judiciary in Poland right now is criticized by the ECJ, by the judicial associations as well. And some of the members take part in the proceedings during before the National Council of Judiciary, just to complain into the court during these proceedings. I will show you also one, I'm not sure if it will work, but I will show you one great activity about the Polish Judicial Association. That's the March of 1,000 Ropes. It will be only 2 minutes, but it will show the connections between the judicial associations from all over the EU. So we will see the judges from the Netherlands, from the Italy, from the Greece. It will be only 2 minutes just to show you how it works. It was January 2020. It was the highest peak of the conflict on judiciary, and the Justitia organized the March of 1,000 Ropes. So many lawyers came to Warsaw, and there was the march, not only the advocates, but also the judges in the ropes. So we just can look on it just for 1 minute, just to show you. That's the Supreme Court building. It was just before of the building of the Supreme Court in Poland, in Warsaw. And in just a few seconds, it will show you, see the participants from many member states of the European Union. There were also the publicity from the Warsaw. So as you see, there were many judges from all over the Europe. It was to show the support of the different societies, the different judges from all over the Europe to the rule of law in Poland and to protecting the rule of law. And it was organized by the Justitia Association. This guy here in the middle is the president of the Justitia Associations, and here you have that there's written that it was written that there is the right for the independence of the judges, is the right of every person in Poland, and it was organized also by the Justitia Association. So the judicial associations also were very important during this match. I will try to go further. And what about Simone said about the risks arising from the judicial associations in the context of the functioning of judiciary? From my perspective, the main risk is the need to cooperate with political parties. It might result of the threat to independence. The judicial associations has no legislative initiative. So it might impose the cooperation with the political parties just to help into the creating or being the member or being the part of the entity which can create the new legal norms. So from my perspective, it is a threat, and it depends on the personal judges, of the personality of judges. So that's the first risk which I see from the cooperation between the Judicial Association and the political parties. From my perspective, the risk is also that the Judicial Association need to act in a way which enable associations to reach the largest possible audience, especially in social media. Of course, we are quite used to click in the internet, but it is sometimes quite difficult to set in 30 seconds in 2 or 3 minutes about the very difficult legal matters. And the third one is non-representation of the entire judicial environment. As I said before, we have in Poland more or less 10,000 judges, and more or less 40% of them are the members of the judicial associations. The fourth one is the acting for the particular purposes of the judges rather than for the common good of the judiciary. And the fifth one is the willingness to promote only the members of the judicial association, to promote the active judges rather than acting for the good of justice. But from my perspective, these risks are the risks for all association, not only the judicial association. And just to conclude, from my perspective, the judicial associations help in protecting the judiciary, especially from the Polish perspective, the rule of law and the right for the fair proceedings during the independent court. The most important tasks for the Judges Association, as I said at the beginning, is to evaluate the legislation proposals and initiate the legal actions to support the independent and what is really important for the protecting the right to fair trial, the efficient judiciary as an association of legal practitioners. And the second, also important but not so much, is the role of the entity that groups together as many judges as possible and supports the judiciary to improve its functioning from the perspective of citizens. And as I said before, the most important threat is the necessity of cooperation with the political power. From my side, it is everything. I will look for the question. Thank you very much. Thanks.
კი ბატონო, მადლობა ბატონო ძალიან საინტერესო იყო.
Thank you very much, Judge Jan. This was very interesting and especially impressive. Where was the video footage? Judges in robes giving helping hand and showing their support for the Polish judges. Such a support is really important, and we can see a lot of judicial activism in Poland, and I can only wish you all the success in standing up for the independence of judiciary and your rights. And we're just a little bit behind the schedule. We can now move on to the third session, to be presented by Mr. Silvio Vincenti. Hello, Mr. Silvio, once again. A few words about Mr. Silvio. He will be speaking also about the role of judicial associations in strengthening judicial independence. At the example of Italy, he's a constitutional law comparative constitutional law researcher. He has a doctor's degree and does interpretation of legislation. He's also he works with the universities of Modena and Reggio Emilia, and he works with various courts, and he works for the improvement of changes and reforming of the judicial system. It will be very interesting to hear his experience, and we can now shift to him and give the floor to Mr. Silvio, please.
Hi, hello everybody. First of all, I want to thank Judge Maizurace. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. Thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you all and thank you to Ms. Jeporice, and thank you to Simone and Jan for the very kind invitation. It is very a privilege for me to be here to talk about such an interesting topic. I as well will try to launch my slides. It's the first time that I use slides on Zoom, but I think that they might work somehow. Can you see them actually?
Yes.
Oh, you can see, okay, the slide, perfect. Okay, so I think I just need to move this one here. I'll open the presentation. Okay, so here I am. So thank you again. And yes, my presentation will deal with the Italian case. So I'll try to zoom into the Italian case. Professor Benvenuti already described some of the main features. So basically my intervention will try to maybe touch again upon some of the issue, and yeah, I think that it really fits well with a comparison as to Poland, as to the Poland case, because in some sense it is the reverse of the Poland case. Whereas in Poland we can see a struggle and the let's say the encroachment of the political power on the judiciary. In Italy, we often feel we face the reverse of the situation. So a problem of judicial association at times wielding power in some direction that at times clashes with judicial independence. So my presentation will be divided in three parts. The first part is a very brief description of the history of judicial association. As Professor Benvenuti already said, the Italian case is quite peculiar because judicial association have a long history, or at least they have a very important history, even though maybe the biggest development was after the enactment of the constitution and Italy turning into a republic in 1946, 1948. But there is a long history to judicial association, and they have been very important to the development of the political situation in Italy, and also controversial. I would say that it is uncontroversial to say that they have been also controversial at times. So that would be the first part, and the second part would be more of like the legal status and the way they influence the political debate and debate in Italy. And the third part will be concerned more with the perspective of constitutional design and general remarks on the situation. So okay, so this is the image of a famous book about the situation of the judiciary in Italy during the Kingdom of Italy. So in the Kingdom of Italy was founded in 1861. So in the period between the founding of Italy as a kingdom, as a unitary kingdom, to the fascist time. And what was typical of the Italian system was a strong contrast between an elite, a clique of very high and powerful judges, and a lower, broader part of judges that had lower wages, that really had a difficult time even in keeping on financially. So there was a huge opposition between a higher, powerful elite of judge and a lower part of judges. There is some talks, and there is at least a narrative about a lack of independence of judges in Italy during the Kingdom of Italy. And this book from Pietro Saraceno, famous historian, political historian, actually rejects or rebuts that claim, in the sense that certainly the judiciary was under the executive in Italy during the Kingdom of Italy, but this clique of very high and powerful judges actually managed to keep some independence. So it's very hard to just say that they weren't independent, that they were under the control of the king or the executive and so on. The birth of the judicial association in Italy can be trace back to two main moments. The first is the Trani Manifesto. Trani is a city in Italy, in the center south of Italy, in 1904, in which judges complained about their situation, their independence, and especially the low wages and the complicated situation for the lower part of the judicial body. And this will be typical of the first part of the history of judicial association, that will be mainly concerned with economic status, and because really this lower part of the judiciary had difficult time even in just having the goods and so on, as just opposed to the higher and powerful judges. But perhaps the first important moment was in 1909, when this first association of judges was founded in Milan. And it was an important moment because they began debating also about reforms in the judiciary in the terms of independence. Nonetheless, as the fascist government took over in Italy, in 1925, the association was dissolved. It was not dissolved because of a specific attack on the judiciary. It was more of the fact that certainly there couldn't be any independence on part of the judges during fascist Italy, but at the same time, I think that the dissolvement of the association came as a result of a general fascism did not want to have independent association. The general idea was that social conflict and the conflict of classes was to be resolved by the fascist union. So every kind of free association of people was not in line with this narrative. So it had to be dissolved. There is also debate about the status of judicial about the role of judges under fascism and under the fascist government. This book is a 2022 book, so the debate is still raging, and it is a lively debate today. We can say that there are even here two narratives. The first narrative is that judges were mainly collusive with the government. They did not put up any kind of opposition to the dictatorial government of Mussolini. And there is another narrative that I personally favor, which is that explain the lack of activism, the lack of resistance on the part of the judiciary because of the constitutional ideology that was at the time. The ideology at the time was very Montesquieuian style. So the idea is that judges had to defer to the government, had to defer to the political rule, and so they had simply to apply what the legislature decided. So I think that it is somehow even unfair to expect too much of this historical period from the judicial bodies or what used to be judicial associations. So this is also a discussion. And then we arrive at the collapse of the fascist regime, and even before Italy was completely liberated by the resistance, and mainly by the Americans and the Allies and so on. The Judicial Association was refunded with President Piga as president, and they retake a role in the founding of the new state. This book is particularly important. I think it's by Ezio Moriondo, and because he describes these critical years of the change from the fascist government and to the birth of the new Italian Republic. In this period, it is also a period for the judicial body to really develop a new sensibility. In this time, a famous relation by the President Piga stressed two of the main features that really had to define, and as we will see, will not define the judicial body. In his thought, which is very representative of the higher magistracy, the old Montesquieuian idea of the magistracy and of the judiciary, the two main features had to be for a judicial association and for the judicial body as a whole, were to be non-syndicalism and apoliticality, non-being political. So on the one hand, the judicial association did not have to become a syndicate. That was to be rejected. both because of the role of the judge and also because it was seen as something, there was raging a debate about classes, conflict of classes, the Marxian theory and so on. So the idea of judges stepping in as a syndicate, as a part of the clashes, was very problematic. So one of the features had to be not to become a syndicate, an official syndicate, a union of judges in the traditional sense. And the other was not to be political. So really stick to the traditional idea of the separation of power, so the judges were to defer to the rule. This had to be, in Piga's idea, the two defining elements of judicial association in Italy. As we will see, both will be dropped, actually. First is non-syndicalism. During the Constituent Assembly in Italy, actually, the first strike of magistrates took place, and that was a remarkable moment. Even though it hasn't been discussed as much, it was a remarkable moment. For the first time, judges actually went on strike, so they refrained from working, and that really struck the imaginary and the thinking of the MPs in the Constituent Assembly. A funny fact is that people and representatives in the Constituent Assembly of Italy were debating whether to acknowledge the right to strike to everybody without any kind of limitation, or to adopt the French formula that said that the right to strike was acknowledged, but at the same time the law and the statute could put up a limitation to it. And especially the Communist Party was trying to adopt a rule that would envision a full acknowledgement without limits in the constitution to the right of strike. And the opposition, especially the Christian Democracy and the Liberal Party, were saying, but what if also the judges began to strike? That would be the end of government, that would be the end of state. And on the Communist Party were saying, oh, you're just making this case up. It is impossible that judges will actually go on strike. And what happened during the Constitutional Assembly was that judges actually went on strike. And unsurprisingly, the decision in the Constituent Assembly was to entrench in the Constitution limitation to the right of strike, because that was really a turning point that made everybody in the Constituent Assembly aware of the fact that limitation had to be established to the right of strike. But in this moment, the first feature of the old magistracy has been dropped. And then it is the moment of the apoliticality and the general idea of being really to have a strong judicial deference toward the decision of the legislature. This is a more complicated development, and it has to do with the diaspora of judicial association. So we, in 1944, the main and unitary, to use Simone's category, the unitary association of judges was representative, in theory at least, of all judges. And then in times, different association within this main association began, these branches begin to branch out, to sprung up. So this is just a summary of main association, third power union of Italian magistrates. And what is striking is that at times also what we could call the higher judges, the one with the Montesquieuian spirit, they really they wanted to branch out because they felt that the judges in Italy were actually becoming too activist, too involved in syndicalism, in union style thinking, and so a lot of association really began to come up in this moment. And another turning point, and this is an image from the declaration at Gardone, another turning point in the judicial association, in the history of judicial association in Italy, is the Congress of Gardone in Brescia. In 1965, this Congress deliberated this motion that basically said that judges should stop from really the judges should have been expected to apply the constitution, not directly, because in Italy, the constitutional review is only for the constitutional court to make. It's not like a diffuse, it's not a model in which every judge can decide whether a law is coherent or not, consistent or not with the constitution. And that is certainly a decision not to exclude common judges from a direct application of a constitution that somehow limits the judge's ability to enforce directly very broad principle entrenched in the constitution. In Gardone, some association, it was not unanimous as a decision, they actually stated that they wanted to enforce, where possible, directly constitutional principle. As all constitutional, as a lot of constitution, the Italian constitution do entrench also very broad and very broad provisions about general values, so that allow for very different kind of interpretation that some can explain on political grounds. So this is really a moment where the conscience, the notion and the awareness of the magistracy shifts. So what is now the situation? I want to, it's not like that, but I think that the better image to explain the situation of judicial association in Italy is to juxtapose the National Association of Magistrates, which, as Simone said, comprises of the majority of almost all judges in Italy, with and can be described as the parliament, as the general consensus, the general venue of all judges. And within the National Association of Magistrates, different parties can compete for the votes of judges. That is because the directive of the National Association of Magistrates is elected within the judges, the associate member themselves. So the different, let's call them parties, of course, they are not theoretically speaking party registered in Rome and so on, but they act like a venue of different ideological thinking about the role of judges, and they compete for justice. So you have changes in the composition of the directive of the National Association of Magistrates, depending on the different moments and the different ideological stance of the judges in Italy. So I try to conceptualize the three main ways in which judicial, I'll keep a track of the time. I try to conceptualize the three main ways in which judicial association will influence in the political and constitutional, let's call it the institutional debate in Italy. The first is can be called as the informal way. Of course, as every kind of judicial association in the world, Italian Judicial Association make a declaration. They make a declaration to the press, and for this is the juxtaposition and opposition of two different Judicial Association secretaries that commented upon a very controversial decree from the Meloni government in last autumn about the rave parties, and they were trying to really break down on rave parties, and the two secretary of two of the main association really took a different stance. On the one hand, the more conservative said, we don't have to comment on the decree, it's up to the political party to decide, whereas the most left-leaning, or let's call it progressive part, say that this was really an incomprehensible piece of legislation that, and actually with some reason, they said that it could lead the way to oppressive and to oppressive of other social venues, social meetings other than rave parties. So this is the first way of informal influence. This is another controversial case. I don't think that I have the time to really, to describe it. This is a really recent case about in which you can also see this informal influence through public opinion. This is a Russian oligarch that was under arrest in Milan, and he was freed, he was liberated by allegedly Russian, I don't know, services and so on. And so a huge, there was a backfire, there was a backlash in Italy about the fact that the judges decided to put this Artemus, this oligarch, under surveillance at home and not maybe in prison and so on. So a huge backlash also because the United States really expected us of taking care and be sure that he wouldn't go away, he wouldn't escape and so on. And there was the decision of the Minister of Justice in Italy to promote disciplinary proceedings against those judges, which is very controversial because the general idea is that the decision, the judicial decision should not be subjected to political evaluation, or is, the general idea of judicial independence. The judges have the freedom to decide what's best in the sense of the law. In this case, there was no division between the judicial association. All take stance against the possibility of disciplinary proceedings. And of course, even in this case, through informal influence, they talked to the press and they made declaration that there was a bad idea to initiate disciplinary proceedings. Second type of influence of judicial association in the political sphere in Italy, this is a semi-formal influence, and that one example is the use of judicial strikes. Actually, the law in Italy acknowledged the possibility of judges to strike. It was very controversial in time, but in 1990, the legislature did acknowledge the possibility of strike, and that is the use of a formal institute like the strike to at times make political points or to criticize governmental reforms and so on. So I conceptualize this kind of influence model as a semi-formal. And then there is the formal influence. How do judicial associations have an impact in Italian society? The most important way is through the election of representatives in the Superior Council of the Magistracy, the judicial body of the Judicial Council of Italy. In fact, the Constitution says that two-thirds of the members in the Judicial Council have to be judges, and there are also the jure members, which are judges, so there is a huge majority of judges. Most of them, in this case, it's 22, because the composition, the numbers can vary, it's the ratio that cannot vary. In this case, there is a huge majority of judges, and these judges are elected from the judges themselves. And in this situation is where for everything private judicial association do get a public law significance, because they make the list, they run as a list, just like a party would do a normal election among the judges. And of course, the power the judicial association have in the Superior Council of the Magistracy is definitely important, because the Superior Council of the Magistracy decides over judicial career advancement, extrajudicial activities, judicial discipline, and so on. So this is really the most formal way in which judicial association have an impact on the judiciary itself, and most generally on Italian society. So just to be in the third part, I try to address the question that was posed. Are judicial associations conducive to more judicial independence, or are they problematic in terms of accountability? Certainly, I think that judicial association can work as a counterpower. They can. This is 2005 Minister of Justice. There was a package of justice of Berlusconi government, a controversial piece of legislation, as always with judicial reforms in Italy, and there was a huge backlash and a huge opposition from the judges. So if we take, of course, it's controversial, maybe it was the best piece of legislation in the world, but if we think that that was a bad piece of legislation, then certainly judicial association played a very good role in opposing that kind of legislation. So they can be very important as counterpower to the political power in defending good values such as judicial independence. But at the same time, judicial association themselves can become a power that we have to survey, to control, and to considered not as only as a counterpower to the political branch, but also as a power in itself that needs to be controlled. You know, the famous problem of quis custodis custodes, who is going to watch the watchers. So, and we come at one of the defining moments, I think, of recent judicial culture in Italy. This was a scandal that erupted in 2019, I think it was May 2019, when this very powerful figure and a former member of the Superior Council of the Magistracy was, his phone was tapped, and a lot of information were tapped and taken, and a whole web of relationship between this figure and judges in Italy was discovered. And what was discovered was what was brought to the light in Italy was really the power that judicial associations have in determining several aspects of the judicial body, such as, for example, career advancement. It was shown that a lot of judges came to Palamara, to Dr. Palamara, to have his help in advancing in the career against other judges. So what was shown, let's say, to the Italian public opinion was that judicial advancement, that judicial career advancement were more based on the relationship to a powerful figure than objective better judging, than objective meritocracy. So that was one of the first and striking problems. And also this reflected in the judicial discipline. There is a judicial commission within the Superior Council of the Magistracy, and in the wake of the Palamara affair, it was at least some scholars pointed out the different treatment of some judges as compared to others because of their link to the prevailing judicial association in the Superior Council of the Magistracy. So this is also something very problematic, because the idea would be that judges should be treated fairly and equally because of what they may have done, you know, from a judicial conduct perspective. So this also was a really critical, you know, situation. So this is my last slide and general consideration about the situation. So my thesis, which is also, I think, both controversial and very plain at the same time, is that judicial association should be framed as a power structure. We should not refrain from doing that. They are, I think also Simone used that word in his intervention. So judicial association work as a power structure. And that is very positive in some instances because they stand against the political power. They can act as a safeguard against judicial independence in the three modes that I try to conceptualize: informal, semi-formal, and formal ways. But at the same time, as all power structure in the world, we have to be wary about possible misuse, about a possible creation of a guild mentality, corporativism within the judicial association themselves, as the Palamara case clearly showed to the scholars and to the public opinion. So this is the balance, you know, that we have the two elements that we have to balance. So my true sense, my thesis is that a strong and activist, that we should generally try to leave judicial association as free as possible, and that judicial associations are very important for constitutional democracy. At the same time, they are best framed in a constitutional arrangement in which there are strong elements of accountability. The problem is when you have, like in Italy, strong judicial association in a system in which accountability as a constitutional notion and in the different ways in different institutions is not so much acknowledged. We have in our constitution, the judiciary is very independent. There are not so many ways to control it, which is good, but it can also be bad if all the judicial association use this power not correctly. So I think that as a constitutional design perspective, the best case scenario would be to have a strong judicial association with strong accountability measure. So that, and I think that this particular situation, strong judicial association with weak accountability measures in Italy, is one of the reasons that accounts for the, I like to call it Italian divergence, but it is very well known. So the idea that in Italy we have very high level of safeguards, constitutional and formal safeguards against encroachment of judicial independence. And at the same time, the evaluation of judicial independence in Italy are actually quite low. People often think that that judges are not independent. How can you explain that? I think that one of the reasons is because people do not perceive judicial judges as independent because of the ties with judicial association and politics and judicial politics in a general fashion. So thank you very much. I hope the phrase is correct from I don't know if it's correct Georgian, but thank you very much for the attention. I hope I was clear in my explanation, and thank you again for the opportunity to talk.
Yes, Silvio, you got everything right. I mean, the Georgian, it says indeed, thank you for your attention. I was making parallels with Poland, with Georgia. You provided some very good cases for the researchers of judicial independence and judicial accountability. In the case of Georgia, Judicial Association, the Judicial Association has a statute or an internal statute, internal law, so to say, which regulates the objectives and the functions. It's hard for me to recall any benchmark activity on the part of judicial associations lately. What I would like to say as well, our association is not like, it doesn't resemble much either Polish or Italian associations, but however, we can say we are maybe a mixed type when we do both ideology and some kind of the working conditions. We also care for working conditions of judges. Any association that goes beyond so the dignity of the judge and the functions of the judge is simply prohibited, directly prohibited by the legislation. Just briefly, I would like to say before we move on to questions and answers, a few words about the objectives of our association. Our association has produced its opinions about independence of the judiciary and also social issues, so interests of judges, but at the same time we are very careful to not go beyond the legally established limits. We have also issued our opinions about the reputation and authority of judges in the public. We've stood up against arbitrary dismissal, any legislation that supports or gives the possibility of arbitrary dismissal of judges. The association in Georgia, our judicial associations are not directly involved in the process of judicial appointments or dismissals. We have also issued press releases and opinions about protection of judges, also invitation of foreign experts to conduct trainings for judges. So those are various objectives that that our organization association pursues. Now, I can, when it comes to questions, so I will voice the questions according to the order of the sessions. First of all, let's start with questions to Simon, and there are two questions. So let me say, first of all, the participant's question. In order to eradicate, so how can judges' participation in order to eradicate selective law or selective justice, and also whether it is possible, legally possible in any European countries for judges to draft their own legislation and submit to Parliament to eradicate selective justice.
So
the question is about whether there are precedents in European countries, but when it comes to the terminology, selective justice is something that promotes discrimination or giving preference to some cases over other cases. And another question to Simon. He said the role of judicial association is kind of a bridge or something like so. It's a kind of a bridge between the judiciary and the society and the public. Or associations are an intermediary factor between the judiciary and the society. And can you give a specific example how the Judicial Association has acted as a conductor or a bridge between the two, between the judiciary and society? Next question, after these two questions, next question goes to Mr. Jan. Judge Jan, the question is whether the protest rally of European judges actually yielded any tangible results. The fact that other judges arrived in Warsaw, did it yield any tangible results? And the final question is to Mr. Silvio. Legality of judicial appointments. Just a second. So is it possible for any authority, a judicial or other authority, to check the legality of judicial appointments? I hope I correctly understood the question. So as I know, it doesn't happen that somebody will check the legality of whether or not a judge was correctly appointed, but if there is any such mechanism, and I would like to thank the organizers, but extremely huge thanks to the speakers, first of all, and also thanks for sharing this very active examples. Now, please, we can now listen to the answers from the speakers, please.
I had a connection problem. Sorry for it suddenly crashed, I think. So I was listening to the second question. I'm not sure if there were some others. It's just two questions, right?
Yeah.
Yes, there were two questions for you. So for one question, participation. Is it legal for judges to fight, or how to say, to participate in any in action to how to say, oppose selective justice? How can judges legally? Are there any? Just a second. Yes. So, are there any? Is there any precedent in European countries where judges can oppose selective judges legally? This is one question. And another question is, can you give a specific example of a judicial association acting as a bridge between the judiciary and the broad public, the broad society?
Yes. So, as to the first question, basically, because you are talking about selective justice, I guess this must be a problem that has to do obviously directly with selective justice, which might be a systematic problem in some countries and in others not. But more generally, obviously, there are cases where judges, through their judicial associations, participate in, let's say, in the drafting process rather than in drafting. And And before this, I mean, Professor Vincetti was talking about this differentiation between informal, semi-formal, and formal ways for judges to participate in policy decisions. Exactly, this is a case, for example, in Italy, judicial associations participate in drafting processes at different levels. They participate, let's say, formally, even though indirectly, precisely through the participation in the Judicial Council. Since the Judicial Council, when it comes to matters relating to the reform of the judiciary, have a say and is consulted by the Ministry of Justice. But at a more informal level, even judicial associations entertain a direct dialogue and relationship with the Ministry and the Minister of Justice. So there is, and as I know, there are many judges within the structures itself of the Ministry of Justice, and these judges are themselves part of judicial associations. So in the Italian case, well, not specifically in relation to selective justice, but there is the general ability of judges and judicial associations to participate in drafting. This might be a bit different, for example, from the French case. Well, this participation in the drafting process is very much lower compared to the Italian case, because it's mostly, at least at an official level, representatives of the top judiciary in ministerial commissions, for example, that participates in drafting legislation. When it comes to the second the second question, well, yes, the bridge between society, I mean, this function that is referred to by Opinion 20 of 2020 of the Consultative Council of European Judges, that says that a judicial association has a role to play also in connecting and bridging society and the judiciary. I will, for Italy, I will refer to two examples. Well, we can say that one example could be the one recalled by Professor Vincetti. He was mentioning in autumn 2021 the proposal basically to forbid rave parties somehow, or to forbid well, not rave parties, but gatherings in which rave party could even, and that was really first of all not a legislative debate. That was first a social discussion, a social debate that involved many sectors of the society, and not just ravers, so to speak. And in this discussion, the judiciary stepped in and voice, or at least some judicial association voiced their own position from a legal but socio-legal perspective, one can say. And a second example is a historical example. I would say, meaning that again, Professor Vincetti was mentioning that between the 1940s, 1950s, and the 1960s, 1970s, there has been a shift in the culture of the Italian judiciary, and basically, and it was opposing basically a conservative judiciary. He was like terming it as a Montesquieuian, or we can say a conservative judiciary on the one hand, and a progressive judiciary on the other hand. This opposition and this shift reflected very much what was happening within so somehow a judicial association that were confronting on this topic at the time between the 60s and the 70s basically were very much reflecting at the level of judgeship and the level of the legal system, a broader discussion that was happening in society, and this is another example on the way judicial association can bridge societal discussion and legal and judicial discussion. So somehow the role of judicial association at the time was to end this idea of the judiciary and the judgeship as something as insulated from society. So this is, I don't know if I answered precisely your question, but these are two examples that I can recall from Italy.
Yes, thank you very much. And next question concerns whether or not the protest, the rally participated by the European peer judges, whether this protest rally yielded tangible results. This question goes to Mr. Jan, and to Silvio. I will describe the question later. So please, Mr. Jan.
Okay, thank you for this question. It is quite difficult to answer for this question, but because if we speak about the social perspective, this mass protest of the European lawyers and European judges have some influence for the perspective of the judges. But if we speak about the reality, about the legal actions which were conducted by the Polish government, there was no result. This March of 1,000 ropes was against this muzzle law, which was enacted in December of 2019 and came into force in February of 2020. This mass protest was in January 2020. So these protests were against this muzzle law, and this muzzle law, as I said, came into force. So the protests have the big social influence and big social impact because the people, the society, had to know that the impartiality of judges are in danger, but in the reality there were no influence. The Polish government made some amendments about this muzzle law, but not because of this mass protest, but because of the EPJ statements, and especially because of the influence from the EU, especially the European Commission, and especially just because they wanted to get some money from the European funds just because of the COVID era. So that was the reason why the Polish government took the step back. This protest had, as I said, the social influence, but not the legal influence. I can say, just in short. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. Understood. And the last question goes to Silvio. The checking of legality of judicial appointments, not only concerning the appointment decision, but also is there a so can anyone check the legality of judicial appointments? And also, so yes, when it's disputable whether or not when there are some good reasons to doubt that the judicial appointment decision was wrong. So is there anybody to check? For example, in Georgia, one of the reasons, for example, you can file a complaint on is that the person was not appointed in accordance with legal criteria, and this could be a basis for dismissal. So, is there anybody, any authority that could do so? Yeah, please.
Thank you very much for the question, which is actually pretty helpful and very it is an important question. I would distinguish between the recruitment of judges and the appointment to directive roles, or generally the advancement of judges in higher position, let's say. Even talking about higher position is somehow controversial from a constitutional perspective, but certainly there is a career in the judiciary. So judges are recruited by open competition. So they are just, they come out of law school and they make a competition and they become basically judge. So, and that part of the process is generally unproblematic, even though recently there have been cases disputed of, rigged exams and so on, but that is generally not so problematic. The phase of the recruitment of judges for someone outside the judiciary to become a judge. The real issue, the real problem, and the real hit comes as to the advancement in the career. So judges naturally have an interest in going to higher places, higher courts, or more important roles in general, or even to assume lateral roles in the administration of the judiciary. In that case, there is a huge litigation before the administrative courts. So the Italian judiciary is actually a plural judiciary, just like Poland, I think. But in case of the Italian case is quite peculiar in the sense there are 5 jurisdictions, the ordinary one, so civil and criminal courts. You have administrative jurisdiction, you have a tax jurisdiction, you have a military jurisdiction, and yeah, maybe I'm forgetting something, but these are the main jurisdiction that you have in Italy. And you have a lot of judges, when they are not selected for advancement in the career, they actually file a lot of ordinary judges, they file a complaint against other judges, against the Judicial Council for the allegedly wrong decision before the administrative courts. There is a huge litigation in this respect. I think it is unparalleled by foreign experience, or at least the one that I looked at. So, and in this sense, the administrative courts actually checks in some way the legality of the ordinary Judicial Council decision. The problem is that the administrative court should only check the legal formality, I would call it the respect of fair procedures. Of course, the merit decision is for the Superior Council of the Magistracy, so the administrative courts cannot decide on behalf of the Superior Council of the Magistracy. They only evaluate the procedural fairness. But in several occasions, this procedural fairness is near to the merit of the case. And so we actually had, I think, I hope Professor Benvenuti can help me on this, but I think it was 2 years ago or 1 year ago that actually the president of the highest ordinary courts, his nomination, the nomination to president, was challenged in the administrative courts, and 2 days before the inauguration of the judicial year, actually the judicial courts said that a nomination was not legal and had to be renewed. So yes, there is an important check on this topic, but actually at the same time, the merit decision stays in the Superior Council of the Magistracy. For example, in this case of the president of the Court of Cassation, the Superior Council of the Magistracy confirmed the vote. So the vote, the nomination, the appointment was annulled by the administrative court. In 2 days, the Superior Council of the Magistracy confirmed the person that was originally selected. So this is also a very delicate and complicated issue of interbranch, interjudicial relations, because ordinary and administrative judges are independent. So yes, there is a check, but it's a complicated check and not always a very, and it should not be a merit check. So it's complicated, but yes, there is from another court, there is a review of the correct fairness of the procedure.
Yeah, if I can add on this, just to say that I think the main problem often for the Supreme Administrative Court is lack of motivation, or the inadequate motivation of the decision relating to the appointment of a certain judge, usually court presidents, and that was, I think, the case for the top court president. And so therefore, let's say the Judicial Council reward the motivation and somehow gives satisfaction to the Supreme Administrative Court. Maybe Karka, I see.
კარგით, მადლობა. ესე იგი, მონაწილეებს აქვს თავად სურვილი, რომ
Understood. Thank you very much. Some participants would like to ask questions themselves. Mr. Kaha Zikarishvili will go to be the first.
Thank you very much for the excellent presentations, all the speakers. I have a few questions and very small clarification on the Georgian situation. My questions, my first question is about the management of the association, whether the association can have a layperson as an executive director, because in Georgia, we used to have executive directors of the association. They spoke on behalf of the association. And this is an interesting example because the executive director is not limited by the norms of ethics. It's not a judge. That person is not a judge. It's an executive director, but it's a lay person, and they talk, and he can talk whatever he wants to talk about. He's not limited by the judicial ethics. The second question is about funding, whether the association may have private funding, like from private organizations or international organizations. And my third question would be about the public information and the website, whether you are publishing reports about what the association is doing. Because in Georgia, for example, we don't know what the association is doing in the last 5 or 6 years. We don't know what they're doing. It's not published. They don't publish their activity. And that will be an interesting question also. And I would like to say one comment about the Georgian situation. In Georgia, we used to have an alternative association, which was called the Unity of Judges. And this was created after the new government in 2013, when the new government came to the power. And this was the association which was opposing the official judicial governance, the official High Council of Justice. They were opposing it. Then they were doing a lot of legislative drafting. They were making public statements. They were making public reports and communicating with the public. And there were about approximately 40 or 45 judges. But then the association vanished. And why? Because the official judicial governance, they was opposed to the association, and there was an informal communication, the informal communication between the members to the members of the association. If you do not leave the association, we're not gonna elect you as a judges in the future. So every member, they left the association because they would not be re-elected as a judges if they did not leave the association. And everybody left the association. There was only one president, and it was Maya. She's here. She's our member, Maya Bakraza. She was the only person who remained. So, and the association disappeared because there was a communication to the members, that informal communication, that if you do not leave the association, you are not going to be a judge anymore because your term is expiring in 2 years, in 3 years, in 1 year, and you're not going to be a judge anymore. So the association just disappeared. And there is also in Georgia, the female association, the Association of Female Judges. And my fourth question is whether you have such association based on gender, like the Association of Female Judges in your countries. And what are they doing if you have such associations? That's my questions. Thank you very much.
Who's going to answer?
Okay, so I can start. First of all, about the executive director, which is not a judge. In Poland, it is not possible only the judges are the members of the associations, and only the judges are in the board or are the executive directors. So only the judges are taking part into all the judicial associations activities. About the fundings, yes, it is possible. For example, the Justitia, the biggest organization, judicial association, can grant the funds as all NGOs in Poland. Sometimes it is the accusation of the Justitia activity that they have the money outside the Poland, so they are not so independent as they would like to be. And the question about the publications of the activities, especially the Justitia organization, the Justitia Association is very active in the social media. So if you Google the Justitia Judicial Association, you can see the website. They have also account on the Twitter, on the Facebook, on the YouTube. So you can see many sources and many articles in Polish. Some of them are in English also, just to show the situation in Poland from the Justitia, from the judge's perspective. So they are very active. I think that this activity depends on the members of the associations. So especially just because the Justitia Associations is very big, more than 3,000 judges, they can be very active because they have very active members. And about the gender of the associations, we don't have only the female or male organizations. Maybe the reason is that the majority of judges in Poland are the women right now. So there is not a big problem about the gender reality in Poland right now. Apart from that, there is still, but I think that there is the same situation in Georgia and Italy, that the board of the courts are male in general. But that's I think that's more social problem, but not the legal problem. So that's the Polish perspective of the answer of your question.
Should I say something, or Silvio, do you want to reply on the Italian? Because we both, let's say.
Yeah, as you maybe. Well, maybe you can, take you can take the first two questions, and I can answer the two latter questions. What do you think?
Yes. Well, I don't remember what are the first two questions because I missed all of them.
Well, as to the management of judicial association and the director, the spokesperson.
Director, so I can say about that. Well, no, basically. Associations in Italy are managed just by judges, judicial associations. So, I mean, there is not such an issue. That's never been an issue, actually, because spokespersons and managers, everyone is a judge within the association. And, not even lawyers are, it's basically judges who are part of the association. So, that's definitely not an issue for Italy. Just my question would be reversed. Why do you have executive directors who act as spokespersons for the judicial association? So that would be my question relating to the Georgian case. And if you want, you can answer. Otherwise, the second question was about
private funding. Yes.
Private funding. Yes. Well, judicial associations in Italy are funded as any other private association because they are a private association of private citizens. So they obviously the citizens who are associated are all judges, but they are associated as private citizens. So the funding comes from the quota, and this is something interesting that might be said in this regard, that Italian judges gain very high salaries, which might be a good thing, but also explains that they can pay their quota. I don't know how much actually is the quota, but they pay a quota, and as any other private law association, they can get national and international, even European funding for carrying out their own activities. So I don't have actually precise data on the ratio of funding from the international national funding, but they can get funding and they get this funding. So that's it. And so Silvia, you can go on female and
yeah, the third question was, if I'm correct, was to the regarding publishing information. I would say that in this regard, judicial associations in Italy are quite good at providing information on the internet. To be honest, I generally check on their website, and they're very active. So of course you won't find maybe the nitty-gritty, the behind the scene debates that they may have, or the documents concerning their meetings and so on. They don't have an obligation to disclose any kind of, they don't even have an obligation to disclose the affiliation, as in the Poland case. So but at the same time, there is a lot of information for researchers to use on the site, especially concerning the activities and the conference they are organizing, and they're often telling of the kind of like the links that they have with political or especially scholars and so on. And regarding the gender, it is very similar to, oh, good, please, Simone. Well, we are not hearing you, the microphone.
Sorry, no, I just wanted to add something on this because it also connects to the funding question. I think not every, but all main judicial associations in Italy have their own journal, and so they even publish journal. Now they are mostly online journal, but they used to be paper journals, which are not scientific journal, but very much closer to scientific journals. So I mean, they have funding, and they use funding also to publish their activities and to publish journals to be active on the public scene, I would say. So just this.
As to the gender question, there is no female or male association. And just as in Poland, I would say that I think, and I'm pretty sure the last data that I've seen, that there is a trend, a confirming trend of majority of judges are female. The directive and higher roles mostly be men, and you being in those positions. So there is a problem of the crystal, you know, there is a problem of career advancement for women, but not, you know, in the population of the judiciary. So yeah, that is, I would say that is not an issue in this respect.
Thank you very much. I would just clarify, because Simone asked me, the idea of executive director or some spokesperson who is not a judge, the idea is, I think, that to have more freedom to talk about everything, to explain, to give explanations and clarifications to the public without being strictly limited by judicial ethics. So that was the idea. Yeah.
So it's a sort of strategy by the Judicial Association to shield its members from threats after.
Yeah, could be. Yeah, could be.
Okay. That's that's interesting. Well, also in Italy we don't have this problem because, as Silvio was explaining at the beginning of his speech, we have a situation which is reversed compared to many other countries, where the problem is maybe not so much encroachment on judicial, judicial independence by political powers only, but also the fact that the judicial I mean, judges have such an important role that there is somehow a lack of accountability, of judicial accountability. So that's, yeah, okay.
Understood. Unless there are any pressing more questions, we can end now. And well, you can. So, if any participant, if there are more questions, you can of course.
I think there is a question. No, I got a question from Maya. Can I maybe answer it? Because she's asking me if there is a limitation of the number, I mean, a minimum amount of judges for the creation of an association. And because that's true that in some countries, there is such a limitation when judicial association somehow are framed by legislation. But this is not the case in Italy. As I was mentioning before, judicial associations are private associations. So there is, formally, they do not carry out any, let's say, state function, so to speak. So, I mean, there is no limitation of this kind posed on judicial association. Maybe there are only two aspects relating to which judicial associations in Italy are acknowledged by the law. The one is, or used to be, actually, participation in elections for the Judicial Council. Now the system is different, so it's they try to somehow hide judicial association from electoral legislation. But one used to be electoral legislation for the Judicial Council. So with the previous system, electoral system, judicial association were mentioned in the law. And the second is a law from, I don't know if it's from the 1990s, that says that the legislator should draft a code of conduct. If the legislator does not draft a code of conduct, it is up to the National Association of Magistrates to draft this code of conduct. And this is what happened. So the ethical code, or I don't know how you would call it, in Italy has been drafted by by the main platform, the National Association of Magistrates, based on conferral, explicit conferral by the law. But otherwise, judicial associations are not really. They are formal institutions because they are association by private law, but they are informal institution in terms of judicial administration.
Understood, and looks like there are no more questions. And basically we can call it a day. My name is Inga. I'm a lawyer in criminal matters for 20 years, about 20 years. I want to thank you so much for the important meeting. You mentioned women. In Georgia, women make more braver decisions than men judges. And so I would like to thank the women judges for being so brave and courageous. Thank you very much for your comment. And we do accept your appreciation. Thank you. So I thank you very much for the presentations, and I wish you everybody success. I too stand by women, whatever endeavor it is. So once again, to summarize, I would like to thank the wonderful presenters. We heard information about various models of judicial associations. There's room for improvement for the existing associations or associations to come in the future. Many thanks both to presenters and to participants for finding time to attend. And I would like to thank also the organizers who arranged this online meeting which was quite flexible, I think, for many people, for many participants. Thank you very much, and I wish everybody a nice day.